I'm here with Tom Wilson. He's the chairman and CEO of Allstate. But I'm going to begin my conversation with Tom Wilson talking about something that is a little more you and a little less Allstate, and that is your tenure as the chairman of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Tom, how is it that America's largest and arguably most important pro-business lobby is at odds with a pro-business president?
We're at odds over things like tariffs. So we believe in free trade, as does many people in the administration. And we believe tariffs should be used. Governments have the right to use them to have free trade, nothing wrong with that. But they shouldn't be used for other political issues. They shouldn't be used with no notice and sporadic and quickly. So we're in favor of using tariffs where trade is not balanced. So like with China. I think China thinks they have a Trump problem. China has really got an America problem. When you talk to businesses around the country, you talk to farmers, they understand China hasn't been playing by the same rules. So China, I think, is hoping that when President Trump acquiesces, they'll be okay. They really have an America problem.
So it's okay to use tariffs in that context to punish China for abusing trade relationships, for denying market access to U.S. companies, and for stealing intellectual property.
Yeah, because those just are the rules we're not used to playing by, and those are the rules the rest of the world doesn't play by. And what they need to do is take their energy and turn it not into being angry at our president, but to self-reflection on how are they going to change their system. It's going to take us a decade to do this. This thing with China isn't going to be over in 6 months or even a year. It's going to take 10 years because they have to change the way their economy functions. And that's fine. We'll help them do it if they let us help them. But if they don't let us help them, they're going to end up with a fight on their hands, and that's not a good thing for either of us.
Beyond trade, Tom, what issues or practices of the president himself or the Trump administration do you and the chamber take issue with?
Our biggest issue is trade. We love what the administration has done on reducing regulation. It had gone too far the other way. And not only has that reduced the work that businesses have to do, it's got their attitudes up, and people are interested in investing. We believe the focus on reducing the tax burden has been good for the economy. There's a bunch of other issues we all have to resolve together, so we're in alignment on a whole bunch of issues.
You know the Democratic field. We saw the first debate among the would-be candidates yesterday. There's another one coming. Of those men and women, Tom, is it axiomatic that if one of them becomes president in 2020, it'll be worse for the economy than it would be if President Trump were reelected?
I think that's too early to tell. What I will say is that the chamber has been more balanced. So we've changed the way we evaluate politicians. It used to be just, did you agree with us? And you had to agree with us 70% of the time. We changed that. Now you can get 20% of the points can be just, did you work with somebody in the other party? We think that we need to work together, that we want Democrats and Republicans to have an effective government. And it doesn't really, it matters who the president is, but we should have a system that helps business thrive no matter who's in charge. How
much dialogue does business on its own or via the chamber have with those Democratic candidates as of now?
Well, they're all out, doing the talking to you and talking to the chamber. I think the challenge will be when it gets into the election period, when do they take a position that we think is wrong, but they feel like they need to take it for the base. So, for example, assuming that everybody's health care should come from the government, businesses provide health care to 65% of our employees. 65% of the people in America get their health care through their employers. Taking that away would be a mess for all of us. And so that's something we'll have to have a long discussion about.
And that was a dividing line in last night's debate, for sure. Let me ask you about interest rates. Low interest rates are the scourge of insurance companies. The president, let's just say, is very consistent in wishing the Fed chairman and the rest of his colleagues on the FOMC would cut rates. The 10-year is already at 2%. What happens to a company like yours with 70% of its investment portfolio in fixed income if rates go lower?
Well, we have to figure out how else to make money for our shareholders. So what we eventually do is we can't make it an investment income on our $90 billion portfolio, then we have to charge a little more for insurance and make more on underwriting. So
high premiums.
We try to serve our customers well, but we also have to make money for our shareholders. I think low rates are needed today, Eric, but eventually we
lower than we have right now.
I don't know if necessarily lower than we are today. It's hard to get lower than 2% on the 10-year. That said, I wouldn't suggest we raise rates today because the economy is still kind of fragile. We had that tax high where we got the bump from the big tax cut. Now things are soft. China's slowing down. Europe's not in a great place. The U.S. consumer's way over leveraged. So we still have some issues to deal with.
Okay, so it sounds to me like you'd be fine if they stayed where they are.
Yes.
Allstate is making a big push into data and identity protection.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Two things. First, consumers are increasingly at risk. Your whole life is on your phone, and so people can track you. And not only can they get into your bank accounts, they can create a whole other you. So we think protecting people from life's uncertainties is what we do. Protecting their identity, now that it's at greater risk, we should help do that. The other thing we're working on is we think consumers are getting a raw deal on their data. So what's happened over time?
Not being fairly compensated for it?
They're not being compensated at all. So you just give your data away.
Well, we get access to services.
Yeah, okay, but here's an interesting question. So Facebook and Google have $192 billion of revenue a year. Would Americans pay Google and Facebook $192 billion to get access to service? I don't know, but I think we should try to find out.
Think so.
I think there are some people who would, and some people who probably wouldn't. And so I think we need to give consumers the ability to manage their digital footprint. And so we're coming out with a product that will actually do that.
Is there too much concentration of private data in the hands of, what we might call a large tech oligopoly?
I think it's hard to tell what too much means, like what would be the consequences of that, but I think if we give people ownership of their data back, so for example, I think there should be three kind of privacy agreements: small, medium, and large. One, you can't use it for anything other than what we're talking about. Two, you can use it, but you got to mush it with everybody else's stuff. And three, you can sell my stuff to anybody else you want. Today, there's thousands of privacy agreements. You have to have a college education to read them, and nobody reads them. So, why don't we standardize that, give control back to the consumer, then we can figure out whether there's too much concentration.
Yes or no, do you think big tech needs to be broken up?
Hard to tell. It depends what the objectives are. But I think it's worth thinking about how do we develop a market economy for individual data.